Global leaders are meeting in Canada this week to discuss the progress in drafting the first global treaty to reduce soaring amounts of plastic pollution. In 2022, the United Nations Environmental Assembly pledged to develop the legally binding agreement to tackle the world's plastic crisis by the end of this year. It aims to address plastic through their entire life cycle, from production, their use and disposal. If it's struck, it could be the most significant deal relating to environmental protection since the 2015 Paris Agreement.
The world is counting on us to deliver a new treaty that will catalyse and guide the actions and international cooperation needed to deliver a future free of plastic pollution. Let's not fail them.
According to the UN's Environment Programme, 1 million plastic bottles are purchased every minute around the world. Up to 5 trillion plastic bags are used globally each year. Half of all plastic products made are designed for a single use before they're thrown away. In total, about 400 million tonnes of plastic waste is produced annually, with trends showing at the current rate, the plastics industry is expected to triple by 2060.
Buy it, use it, throw the rest away.
That was how plastic products were promoted in the past. These days, less than 10% of plastic is recycled. Much of it ends in landfill, in oceans and waterways. But the environmental toll is much greater. The plastics industry now accounts for 5% of global carbon emissions, and that could reach 20% by 2050.
Plastics became the epitome of consumer culture in the mid-20th century. Cheap, disposable, and modern, or so we thought. We trained ourselves to become reliant on the disposable consumer culture. We're here today because we recognize that we must throw away this throwaway generation. We need to forge a new global consensus that ends the costly, inefficient, and harmful waste of plastics.
More than 3,500 people from more than 170 countries are attending the talks in Ottawa, including lobbyists, business leaders, politicians, scientists and representatives from environmental groups. Australia is part of a 60-nation high ambition coalition that wants to end plastic pollution by 2040 and to ban the certain chemical additives that can carry health risks. Plastic and petrochemical producing countries such as China, Saudi Arabia and Iran oppose production caps, chemical disclosures or reduction schedules. They argue it would lead to higher prices for consumers.
We know aspirations to end plastic pollution has no value on their own. Aspirations must become action.
On the corporate side, more than 200 companies have joined what they call the Business Coalition for a Global Plastics Treaty. Now, it supports restrictions and phase-outs, reuse policies and extended producer responsibility and waste management.
We are seeing convergence on eliminating the uses that are problematic and avoidable. We'll continue to need plastic for specific uses, electrical, transport, construction, but there's a growing agreement that much of the short-lived and problematic and single-use can probably go.
Hong Kong is the latest territory to introduce rules on single-use plastics. In Australia, states and territories have also taken similar steps, but individuals can also play a part.
Even small steps make a difference because big supermarkets notice when people ask for less packaged material. Also, our kids pay attention. If they're shopping with us and you talk about why you're reaching for the glass jar rather than the plastic jar, it's an opportunity for education.
Kip Hamilton from the Australian Marine Conservation Society is attending these talks in Ottawa. She says nations like Australia are trying to remain optimistic about the treaty measures.
We really need this treaty to be ambitious and to really focus on stopping the production of plastics so that we're not ending up with another 11 million tonnes of plastics entering our oceans year upon year upon year.
Was it plastic production that saw the previous meeting end in deadlock with, plastic producing nations dragging their feet on this issue?
Yes, there's obviously some countries that have very vested interests in continuing the production of plastics, but there's also a number of countries that have vested interests in stopping the production of plastics. Plastics is something that really impacts all of us globally. It's become a global crisis, and it's really impacting all countries, including many small island developing nations that are bearing the brunt of our continuous plastic use.
So what are the countries, the bigger name countries amongst those that are dragging their heels on this?
There's a number of countries in a group called Like-Minded Coalition, and they're the states that are continuing to produce plastics and sort of focusing on end-of-life solutions such as recycling.
So Saudi Arabia, I understand, amongst them. Do they have to be on board? Does there need to be full consensus, or can there be a majority?
It's likely that countries will need to reach consensus. We'll find that out in the 5th round of negotiations at the end of the year in Korea. But as well, once we develop this plastics treaty, it's also a voluntary implement that countries then sign on to.
And, I mean, do you think these hurdles can be overcome, or do you think it will end in a situation where those that want to be on board go ahead with it and leave others behind?
We know the vast majority of countries, as well as the vast majority of the community all around the world, are really wanting an ambitious treaty. So I remain highly optimistic that we can get a good result.
And we've had talks in the lead up to this and more to come, as you just said. So what are the range of outcomes that we could see in Ottawa?
What we're hoping to see in Ottawa is significant progress on the draft treaty. We're at 0 draft at the moment. We really need to reduce the number of options on the table and get that 70 pages of text down to something that can actually be negotiated and then implemented, as well as wanting to see some intersessional work between the end of negotiations here in Ottawa and the 5th session in Korea.